Let me introduce you to the president of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. This is Clifford May. Clifford has a long, distinguished career in international relations, journalism, communications, and policies. From about 97 to about 2001, he served as the director of communications for the Republican National Committee, which I'm sure kept him on his toes. He has been all over the place reporting stories in many different countries, Iraq, Afghanistan, Israel, the West Bank of Jordan, Ethiopia, China, Uzbekistan, and on and on and on. And obviously, we're going to be talking about the same thing we just talked about as we wound up with Victor Davis Hanson, our friend, this deal with Iran that is not. Mr. May, welcome to KMJ. Great to have you on, sir.
Good to be with you, and always glad to follow Victor Davis Hanson. Great admirer of his.
Yeah, he's a good friend, and he's a pretty solid head. This deal that we have cut, what the president has cut, really, I don't know what it is. Do you? Try to explain this thing to us, please.
Here's the easiest way I can explain it. Imagine if I were to come on your show in October of 2001, and you asked me to make a prediction, and I would say, okay, here's my prediction. Within less than 15 years, we'll have a president offering to give tens of billions of dollars plus at least 2 pathways to nuclear weapons to the leading terrorist sponsoring regime in the world. You'd have probably said, okay, this guy is really crazy. Let's never have him on the show again. Turns out, however, I would have been correct. That's what's going on right now.
Very true, yes. That's about all it is. I mean, it certainly doesn't do anything to protect Israel, us, Middle Eastern neighbors. I mean, there's nothing in there that says the world is going to be any safer.
At most, it attempts to delay the pathway that Iran would take to a nuclear weapons capability by 10 or 15 years. That is, if Iran complies with the agreement in every way that it's meant to. Now, Iran has never complied with agreements in the past, according to the letter, according to the spirit. Never before. It has violated them in the past. But if it did, you would essentially be saying, all right, let's take 10 or 15 years. That's enough time. At that point, even if Iran is still the leading sponsor of terrorism in the world, even if it's still saying this regime, this revolutionary regime, is based on a belief that we must bring death to America and death to Israel, we still will welcome them into the nuclear club as an enriched and empowered nation. That is still the basis of the agreement. The agreement went off the tracks. It was meant to dismantle the nuclear weapons capability that Iran does not still admit to having. Instead, it said we'll settle for a delay, and for that, we will let you have lots of money, and we'll give you a path to nuclear and conventional weapons, too. That's in there as well somehow.
Yeah, there was supposed to be no centrifuges. There was supposed to be no enrichment. There was supposed to be, at-will inspections 24/7. Now, we understand through a document that AP allegedly discovered yesterday through the UN, the one particular sensitive plant, Parchin, is going to be inspected only by those Persian inspectors, Iranian citizens only, no inspections from the outside. What kind of a deal is that?
A very bad one, and it's not just about Parchin, which is a place where we believe nuclear weapons research was conducted years ago, and it's probably been wiped clean since then and not with a cloth. What we believe really is that the Iranians have been saying for some time, you can have international inspectors, though they can't be Americans or Canadians, we rule them out, but you can have international inspectors at what we say are declared nuclear facilities, but not at military sites, for example, or undeclared facilities. Now, this is how they'll do it. They'll say, look, if you want to inspect a nuclear facility, that's fine, but our inspectors will do it. We'll look into whether we have violated any agreements, and we'll let you know. Is that okay? And this agreement, which is a secret agreement, evidently the Secretary of State has not read it. That's how secret it is. And Congress has not read it, even though Congress is supposed to be able to review everything before it decides whether to approve or disapprove this deal. Evidently, this says, as long as you're doing it, it's a little like saying, let's have professional athletes not only supply their own urine samples, but also do the analysis on them.
Let me take a page out of Victor's book on this and see what you think of it. Victor was saying that the president really doesn't have any foreign policy. He doesn't have any legacies in foreign policy. And this is going to be his way of saying, looky here what I did. I brought Iran out of the dark ages. I brought them into the free world. I brought them into the nuclear world. I brought them, out of all of the rack and ruin that these embargoes have brought upon them. And they're a wonderful and bright country now, thanks to what we have done for them. Blah 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 blah. Do you buy into any of that?
Well, I think Victor, as usual, is quite correct. I think that President Obama thinks two things. One is that he's doing a sort of Nixon to China, if your audience knows that phrase. In other words, Nixon went to China and opened relations in the China. And it's not that China is our best friend. It's not an ally, but opening relations probably was a smart idea. But China was willing to have Nixon in Beijing. They were nervous about the Soviet Union at that time. Trust me on this. President Obama is not being invited by Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei to come and drink pomegranate juice in Tehran with him, because the basis of this revolution, which took place 36 years ago in Iran, I happen to be there as a reporter covering it, is the idea that America needs to be brought to its knees and, if possible, destroyed. They don't expect to do that in the short run, but they do in the long run. Israel, they think they may be able to destroy in the shorter run, just because it's smaller and doesn't have the strength that the United States has. And by the way, it's in the neighborhood.
Is there any meaningful quid pro quo in this at all that we can put our sink our teeth into and say, okay, we got something out of this?
Not really. Every red line that Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader, established, as far as I can tell, has not been crossed. Every red line that President Obama established has been crossed. What you're saying is we are going to give up all our economic leverage, all our economic tools and weapons. We've already long ago taken the possibility of using kinetic methods, in other words, bombing these facilities, off the table, so they didn't have to worry about that. We're taking it all off the table, in exchange for which we'll get a delay. You'll promise a delay in this nuclear weapons development program that you don't admit you ever had. Keep in mind, they do not say that they will stop their program. They said we never had one, right, and we confirm that we are not interested in having one.
Here's my concern. Although there weren't any earmarks of this happening, but I think eventually it may have. I always felt, as long as we kept the sanctions up and running, that Iran would implode from the inside. Eventually, the population, perhaps the young population, the educated population, would say, enough. We want to, join up with Western Europe. We want to embrace the Western world. We want to do something different. We've had it. Now that we have capitulated, removed the sanctions, we have taken that possibility of it exploding from the inside, imploding away, have we not?
Well, I think that is all correct. I do think in 2009, what you described did happen. People went out in the streets and said, we're fed up. We're fed up with the phony system. And it came close, but the regime was really harsh and brutal about repressing the uprising, and the uprising got no support from President Obama or from Western Europe or anywhere else. People think that sanctions are one thing, which is like saying that a .22 caliber handgun is the same as a .50 caliber sniper rifle. They're not. We had serious sanctions pressure on this regime, not as serious as it could have been, but escalating serious sanctions pressure until November of 2013. Then we relieved it as part of the interim agreement and began giving Iran $700 million a month just to negotiate with us. At that point, there was no real pressure. Their economy moved from serious recession into recovery. What some members of Congress wanted to do from the beginning is increase the pressure until the economy was in danger of being crippled and the regime was in danger of collapsing because it simply couldn't sustain. At that point, yes, there would be a spirit of conciliation and compromise. Would that have worked? We don't know. We will never know because it wasn't tried. President Obama decided instead to remove the economic pressure, remove the pressure of real warfare, and just try to be persuasive, to reach out a hand and say, please unclench your fist. What's happened now is that the fist remains clenched, but they're apparently going to take everything we have in our hand out of our hand and out of our pockets as well.
Wow. Clifford May is joining us now on KMJ. He's the founder and the president of the Foundation for Defensive Democracies, which you created immediately following the 9/11 attacks. After your long, illustrious career, why did you form this group, and what is the point of this group? What are you doing?
Well, this group was formed, as you say, in large measure in response to the 9/11 attacks. Although I got to tell you, the people who I was talking to about it, such as Jack Kemp, who you'll remember, your younger people may not.
I love Jack Kemp, one of my favorite people.
He was a vice presidential nominee. He was head of HUD. He was a football player. He was a congressman. And Jeane Kirkpatrick, who was the first woman ever to serve
one of my other favorite people.
Exactly, as ambassador to the UN and a member of Ronald Reagan's cabinet. They talked to me about terrorism and what we nowadays call jihadism and Islamism. literally about a week before 9/11. And then after 9/11, we talked about it again, and they thought there needed to be a group seriously looking at terrorism, and I would say now Islamism and jihadism and the groups behind that, and what policies we could have and should have in order to defend ourselves and help our allies defend themselves from this 21st century enemy. And it is a self-proclaimed enemy of America, of Israel, of the West, of democratic societies. That was the idea. And after 9/11, it became very clear that this was going to get done, and so we created it in a tiny little office early in 2002, and we've been growing ever since. And I'd like to think that we are utilized by people on both sides of the aisle for our research and the quality of the information and policy advice that we're able to provide.
If you were going to advise any Democrats that we're beginning to drift away from this. We have Mr. Schumer, who's obviously drifted away, Mr. Menendez, who's joined him. There are a couple of loud voices in the party, and they may start a whisper campaign that could join a shouting campaign. What would you tell these guys?
Well, very simple, and I think we are trying to tell as many as we can, and we're talking to as many as we can. Look, at one point, President Obama said over and over again he would prefer no agreement to a bad agreement. Now he's saying basically he prefers a bad agreement to no agreement because the only alternative is war. That's not true. He was right the first time. This is a bad agreement. You should say so by disapproving of it and voting to disapprove it. One, because it's honest. Two, because the next administration will have more leverage and more latitude if it's clear that a majority of members of Congress, representing a majority of the American people, understand that this is a very bad, very dangerous agreement. And third, because by disapproving it, you will slow the gold rush of investors going into Iran. Businessmen will say, I don't know that I want to invest a whole lot of money that might get stuck there, so I think I will wait and see what happens. For all those reasons, it's important. Now, the idea that there is no alternative but war, absolutely not true. More than 200 times in American history, we've had treaties and agreements go to Congress in some form, and Congress say, you know what, that's not good enough. We need you to get addenda. We need you to get some corrections or some clarification of this agreement. For example, what you just spoke about, what we seem to be hearing now is that Iran intends to inspect its own sites. The Iranian rulers intend to have only Iranians and Iranian equipment to find out whether they're doing wrong. Does there not need to at least be clarification that, in fact, real inspectors will be able to get into suspected sites so that we actually know what's going on? Should we not at least clarify with our allies, such as France, what will happen when we find out, as we're likely to, that there are violations of this agreement, because it's not clear. And there are parts of this agreement that really do need some serious correction, particularly paragraphs that say that any sanctions for any reason, including Iran's continuing support of terrorism, will mean that Iran will be relieved of its obligations under this agreement. Do we really want such a deal? We have made too many concessions, and I think it's time to go back to the table. If we can't, let's go back to the way we had it before. Serious sanctions on Iran until and unless they begin to mend their ways.
We have to take a quick breather. We're talking with Clifford May. We'll continue and wrap it up with him. He is the president of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Phone numbers, if you want to dive in from anywhere in California, 800-776-5858, 490-5858. For News Talk 580, 105.9 KMJ and the Ray Appleton program. We'll pay the bills, and we will be right back in a couple. Stay put. We are talking with Clifford May, who is the president of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, about this nuke deal with Iran. And if I sound stumbling, confused, and stupid every time I bring this deal up, and I have many times and sounded that way many times, it's because I don't understand it, and I don't know that anybody does, because it's not much of a deal. But we do have some phone calls from Mr. May. RC, thanks for your patience. Go right ahead. You're on.
Yes, good afternoon. I wouldn't even ask you this, but it's such a credible threat. And what it is that I've heard that through a theory that Iran has fully developed their enrichment program, and they have ballistic missiles from Russia. They're so much further ahead, and that's why you see the capitulation from Obama. Is that a possibility?
Well, I guess it's a possibility, but it's a theory. There's no evidence to that effect. We think that they have been building ICBMs. By the way, the only reason to build ICBMs is to deliver a nuclear warhead to another continent. In other words, not in the Middle East, but someplace like, the U.S. But I think it's doubtful that they have developed nuclear warheads, have fitted them on missiles, and have missiles that can travel that far. We haven't seen the testing. Again, a lot of things are possible, but without the evidence, there's no reason to believe they're likely to be the case. And I think to think that Obama is doing this because he thinks it's already the horse is already out of the barn, I find that difficult to believe. Lots of things are possible.
Thanks, R.C. I'm a staunch defender of Israel. You probably are too. What does this do in terms of our relationship with Israel, which I think is pretty much in shambles right now? This deal probably doesn't enhance that relationship any further.
Well, listen, Israel is America's most reliable ally. I think in many ways it's America's most valuable ally. It's in the front lines of a war against what I believe to be a common enemy. Again, I would call it jihadism, Islamism. It comes in many forms, both Sunni and Shia alike. I think Israel just feels, as by the way, do the Saudis and the Emiratis and other Sunnis in the region that we have been getting along with. They all feel kind of abandoned. They all feel that Obama, for some reason, seeks a détente with Iran. Iran is not reciprocating that love, and that they are going to face a richer, which is absolutely clear, and a militarily stronger, certainly conventional and before too long nuclear armed as well, Iran, which has clear imperial ambitions. Iran right now is in control of 4 Arab capitals. And I think that the belief is that Iran intends to be what President Obama called euphemistically a very successful regional power. But to Iran, that means it'll be the colossus, the hegemon of the Middle East, and that is very
and historically,
dangerous.
The Arabs and Persians, they're not kissing cousins. They've had their problems.
Oh, there is a conflict that has been going on for more than 1,000 years between Persians and Arabs and between Sunni and Shia. That split is a very important one. And if one wanted to solve a conflict, you might want to start with that one, since that's the older one. No, it's even among the jihadists on both sides, there is what I would call a rivalry. They're not enemies, but they're rivals, and there is collaboration. For example, we do know that Iran has collaborated with al-Qaeda. There is no question about that. Now, that doesn't mean they love each other. They will kill each other at times, too, but they have collaborated, and they've collaborated when they've had a common enemy, and we are that common enemy. Israel is that common enemy. Actually, the regime in the Saudi Arabia, the royal House of Saud, is considered a common enemy of those two.
What about Iran and ISIS?
That's interesting. ISIS, as you know, used to be part of al-Qaeda. It was al-Qaeda in Mesopotamia, al-Qaeda in Iraq, it was sometimes called, or between the two rivers. It drifted away and fractured off and became its own thing. ISIS is Sunni, not Shia. It has a different plan than did al-Qaeda. In other words, al-Qaeda never thought to establish a caliphate. Osama bin Laden didn't see himself as being the caliph. He thought that was all premature. They had a lot more to do. Particularly, they wanted to bring down the great infidel empires, the Soviet Union, which did fall, and then the United States next. And so there was a difference in strategy between the two. Now, ISIS is our enemy. That doesn't make Iran our friend. And if we were to help, as some people are suggesting, and in some ways we are, if we were to help Iran destroy ISIS, that will help ensure that the Iranian empire continues to build. What's called the Shia Crescent would go from Iran to Iraq to Syria to Lebanon, where Hezbollah is its proxy, which is in Lebanon, and Hezbollah has killed many hundreds of Americans, and then, of course, into Gaza with Hamas. And that would be the beginning, because then there's also Yemen, where you have Houthi rebels, also Shia, being supported by Iran. Iran, I think, among other things, means to control the main water routes of the region, and by that to also control the flow of oil to Europe, and that will give it tremendous amounts of power. I think that's in their plans.
Boy, I swear, you really need a scorecard, don't you? If there were to be a test on this later today, I would really flunk. I'm telling you, it is bad. Trying to understand.
Well, we should make it as simple as we can. I know. It's a lot of bad actors, and there are a few actors who are friendly to the U.S., I would say a simple way to organize your foreign policy is to let people know that you're the best friend anyone can have and the worst enemy anyone can have. And in a way, we're doing the opposite. We're telling our friends they can't rely on us. We're telling our enemies they needn't fear us. That is the worst way. Ask Victor David Hanson about that. That's the worst way to conduct your foreign policy. All
right, Clifford May, how does the audience on the West Coast find out more about you and your group?
DefendDemocracy.org is the simplest way. All our stuff, our reports, our columns, all that is up there as well. I write a column for the Washington Times every Wednesday morning. Easy to find online with the Washington Times. That's available everywhere as well.
Good stuff. I've enjoyed it. Thank you much, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hope to have you back sometime.
Pleasure.
Take care. Clifford May on KMJ, the president of the Foundation for Defensive Democracies.